Okay, so uh, people have been desperately trying to make canceling Dave Chappelle a thing ever since the closer dropped. And I can't think of a better example of how out of touch our cultural elites are with the public. Because, first of all, the closer is not what they're claiming the closer is. The closer is a very complicated comedy special that raises some very complicated issues. When you look at the story he tells about his transgender friend to close out the special, I don't see how anybody can come away from that saying the special was anti-trans. That is an extremely dishonest take. If you feel that it's anti-trans, what you're saying is that you cannot make jokes about the trans community. You cannot critique the trans community. You cannot ask questions about the intersection of race and sexuality and ask questions about different levels of privilege and the ability to claim outsider status, but then to back off of that claim. I think that was one of the things that really upset activists. He had a bit where he was basically saying, well, if you're gay, you can be an oppressed minority when you want to be. Black people can't take that off.
He's saying how he got into an altercation with either a gay person or a trans person. They were white, and they threatened to call the cops.
Right,
and he's like,
exactly.
I can't threaten to call the cops, right, as a black guy, right? And so he said, that was his line. He says, they want to be gay until it's time to be white again, or something like that.
Exactly. And hey, that is in the great tradition of the great social comedians that we've had going back to Lenny Bruce, forcing very uncomfortable conversations about social hypocrisy, about things that we don't want to talk about. Now, you don't have to agree with his point of view there, but if you don't agree with it, guess what you get to do? Argue with it, debate it. You don't try to ban it, and you don't try to cancel it.
Right, that was good. Or if you really don't like it, you could turn it off.
You could turn it off.
Right.
You don't tell other people they can't watch it.
Exactly.
They can't be exposed to it. And you don't make the dishonest argument of trying to tie Dave Chappelle to an anti-transgender right-wing agenda. That is not where he's coming from. And even if he was, you argue against it. You say that this is not right. Convince people with the strength of your argument, with the weight of your argument. This idea that people should not be exposed to ideas because they're too dangerous. The more that people who associate themselves with the left are connected to ideas like that, the more you empower the right wing, because most people don't like it. And especially when you're talking about Dave Chappelle, who is arguably, and in my opinion, the most important comic voice of his generation, you're barking up the wrong tree if you're going to try to force the public into a position where they have to cancel Dave Chappelle. And that's why this keeps failing. The media keeps trying to drum up a narrative that we're going to cancel Dave Chappelle, that there's a groundswell of people who want to cancel Dave Chappelle. And it keeps not panning out. So Matt Taibbi did a great piece on this about how all the media talked about how at least 1,000 people were going to walk out of Netflix in protest of the closer. Dozens walked out. But the media drummed it up like, oh my God, there's going to be this big walkout at Netflix. So this is the question. Who really thinks that Dave Chappelle did a transphobic special here? Who really believes this? Obviously, people who have a lot of control over media and the microphone and the spin, if you read any article on this, they will never describe it as some people believe his jokes were transphobic and homophobic. They will always state as a fact that people are upset because he made jokes that were transphobic and homophobic. They cut off the possibility of debate. So here Taibbi's talking about, by Wednesday, October 20th, the day of the planned walkout, the story became it had originally been 1,000 Netflix employees.
And this was a year ago, by the way. This is October 2021.
The story became hundreds of Netflix employees and supporters are expected to show up. That was CNN. Then as the event started, it became hundreds of protesters stood in solidarity with Netflix employees. That's the Daily Beast. NBC told us hundreds rally outside Netflix. How many employees walked out? Not one news organization put the real number in a headline, and only a few had the guts to even tweet that the actual protest was reduced in the end to the famed Arrested Development meme. He's talking about the episode where Tobias screams, "There are dozens of us! Dozens!" Now, here's another thing that really exposes the whole hypocrisy of this movement. The person who led this protest was revealed to have dropped horrible, racist, and homophobic tweets and memes over and never got canceled from Twitter. This person is not. Why are we not demanding her cancellation? Isn't this an important fact that this transgender activist leading this, talking about how Dave Chappelle doesn't get to suck all the light out of it? What we do is pour equity into these spaces. Isn't that a legitimate journalistic endeavor to expose that this person is not only racist, but homophobic? There are other tweets where she's talking about, I don't want to repeat the word, but she's using very derogatory phrases for gay people, calling them furry, slipper wearing fuckboys, and, just really horrible stuff. So where are these people demanding that she get canceled? Where are they? All these people want to cancel Dave Chappelle. Where are they? Why don't they cancel this person? Whenever you have something that doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to promote, they're silent. They're silent. And a lot of people who are not in that bubble see that. So we have another example of this here, where we had a news story that seemed to have gotten drummed up. And in fairness, it seems to have started on the right. It seems to have started at the Post. But all the usual suspects, the Daily Beast, Huffington Post, they all jumped right on this, CNN, that the writers at SNL are going to boycott because Dave Chappelle is hosting, as he traditionally does after elections. He's going to be hosting tomorrow. According to Chappelle's rep, and I don't think they would make this up, this is a total fabrication. And I also believe it because you'd have these virtue signaling motherfuckers would be tweeting out that they're boycotting. So if you don't have any tweets like that from the writers, they're not boycotting. It's bullshit.
That's upsetting to me because I was actually looking forward to this week's episode, because between Chappelle hosting and the worst comedy writers in the history of show business boycotting, it would probably be a pretty funny show.
It would have actually probably helped the show if these fucking idiots boycotted.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like they're actually boycotting. But look, they all grabbed on that headline. Oh, some SNL writers are boycotting. All off the New York Post, right? Which they're supposed to have a certain disdain for. But, they like the story. They like the narrative. So they all jumped on it. We have one tweet from a non-binary writer at SNL who it doesn't look like even is boycotting. Just making a kind of oblique statement against it. Do we have that?
Yeah, that was an Instagram thing. I couldn't actually find that piece.
Okay. Well, we have one non-binary.
I don't know Instagram. We need an Instagram
making a
intern.
statement about trans rights being human rights, and that's about it. And doesn't even make the statement that she's boycotting. So that's nonsense. Now that's very interesting to me, because one gets the impression that these people working in these media companies are the elites who want to cancel Dave Chappelle. Doesn't really seem that way. So it seems like the people who feel that way are an even smaller minority than we would think. Okay, so here's the closer. All right, so maybe they're all critics or critics who are afraid of being canceled. I mean, I could see that. I could see being a critic being afraid of giving it a good review. Right? Like you're going to get fired from your review position if you give it a good review. So I don't even know how much of the 40% critic rating is just from critics being intimidated.
Well, a lot of critics didn't even want to review it at all because, as you can see, there's only 10 reviews that registered with
so there
Rotten
you
Tomatoes.
go. Right.
So most critics
they
didn't even
want to get
into
it
either way. Right. Exactly.
Well, and it's got a 95% audience score. So now finally, to show how dishonest the argument to cancel Chappelle is, Matt Orfalea did another video where he clipped together some of what Chappelle had to say about his transgender friend, Daphne. Now, this is something that they really don't want to talk about. Daphne came out and defended Chappelle and was harassed severely by the transgender activist community and committed suicide. Now, can you say that's the only reason she committed suicide? No, but it's certainly an element.
Well, it happened 6 days after the whole Twitter thing blew up.
Right. So they don't want to talk about that. And if you listen, you're going to hear, this isn't the complete monologue, but it's some of the highlights of it. How can you come away from that special feeling that Chappelle is anti-trans? If anything, this monologue humanizes a trans person in a way that 10 million trans rights or human rights tweets could not accomplish.
Yeah, so we're going to play the second half of this Orfalea montage. We're just going to play it right off of his YouTube so that everybody sees the name of the channel, because we encourage you to subscribe to his channel and support his work. He does really good work. And, as a video editor myself, I could tell you each one of these pieces is painstakingly difficult and tedious and long to produce. Like it's not easy to do what he does. So definitely go subscribe to his channel. But we're gonna play the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, we don't usually grab other people's videos like this, but
that's why I'm not playing the whole thing. Yeah. I just want to give a tease out, and then I encourage you all to go subscribe over there. So here, let's hear the second half of this.
Sticks and Stones came out. A lot of people in the trans community were furious with me. And the hardest thing for a person to do is go against their tribe if they disagree with their tribe. But Daphne did that for me. She said, punching down on someone requires you to think less of them. And I know him, and he doesn't. He doesn't punch up, he doesn't punch down, he punches lines, and he's a master at his craft. That's what she said. Beautiful tweet, beautiful friend. And when she did that, the trans community dragged that bitch all over Twitter. 6 days after that wonderful night I described to you, my friend Daphne killed herself. True story, my heart was broken. I don't know if it was them dragging her, I don't know what's going on in her life, but I bet dragging her didn't help. I was very angry at them. I was very angry at her. I felt like Daphne lied to me. She always says she identified as a woman. And then one day she goes up to the roof of a building and jumps off and kills herself. Clearly. Only a man would do some gangster shit like that. Daphne would have loved that joke. That's why she was my friend.
All right. Yeah, I love that. Daphne would have loved that joke. That's why she was my friend. Now, look, here's the thing about that special, because I watched that special, and, as someone who grew up watching George Carlin specials, Carlin and Chappelle have in common the fact that their specials are really more like one-man plays than comedy specials.
Right. Yeah.
Where they're these theatrical works where sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're serious, right? You have to kind of watch it beginning to end in order to get everything about it. And, we've mentioned the old Marshall McLuhan phrase, the medium is the message. I feel like Chappelle's pieces here that he puts out, these hour-long specials, are not as conducive to streaming as they would be to, like, in the old days when Carlin would do a special. It was on HBO at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, and everybody was looking forward to it. They would make a time to, okay, we got to be home by 10 to watch this. When you make an event out of something like that, or certainly, obviously, they do them for live audiences. When you go and see a comedy show, there's a level of investment that the audience makes in the show that leads them to want to sit through the whole thing, whether they like it or not. Because this Chappelle special required a certain amount of patience on the audience's part. Because look, the first 20 minutes of it, I wasn't really thrilled about either. Like, I did think he was punching down in the first 20, 25 minutes or so. I did think it had this sort of, like, you know, he just came across as kind of put upon, right, for reasons that you don't really know why. And then you find out why in the end when he tells this moving story about his friend. But when things are on Netflix, like, and now streaming,
people are watching it
in
chunks.
They watch it when they feel like it. They watch it turn it on their phone, watch 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And if they don't dig it, or if they're offended by it, if they're put off by it, they just won't watch the rest of it. And so that's something that I think, you know, Chappelle, I don't want to say should be more mindful of. He's one of the most successful comics in the world. What does he need to take advice from me for? But I'm saying, I think that's part of the reason why this got such backlash, because a lot of people heard some of those early jokes and they just decided, you know what, this is not for me, and that was it. And I think that is a big part of it. Now, I stuck with it through the end because, like I said, from watching the old Carlin specials, I knew this had an arc to it. This has to come together in some way, and sure enough, it did. But yeah, I mean, you know, he did kind of invite some of this backlash on himself by, you know, putting a special like this out on a streaming platform to a very short attention span audience. And now look, the Rotten Tomatoes scores 95% positive, right? Most people loved it. But he did an hour's worth of material before getting to that story at the end. And so not everybody saw that. And certainly the media is not going to center that. I mean, this is another thing that we've been talking about throughout this segment. The media, once you get on their bad side, they just shit on you whenever they can for whatever reason.
Of course. Well, we come full circle, man. I mean, they manufacture these narratives. And this is why people who get their news that way are so uninformed and ignorant. Do you know how many people I've seen who are in the arts? This is what kills me. Who jumped right on the Dave Chappelle banning thing? How can you? How can you? As an artist, don't you know you're next, you stupid motherfucker? Don't you know once you open this door, what do you think, the left is always going to be in control of sensibilities in the media? What happens when you've opened this door and the right is back in control of media sensibilities? They're going to fucking ban you, you fucking moron. They all lined right up with the Joe Rogan bullshit. Another person who has heterodox views that you cannot define as right-wing. And it wouldn't matter if you could. That is not the way to handle it. Unless he's threatening people, that's it. It's fucking speech. You leave it alone. You disagree with it. You argue with it. You don't ban it. You don't deplatform it.
Please clap.